Some people do not trust love when it arrives softly. They trust it only after it survives confusion, distance, silence, or disappointment. They will not always say they are testing you. It happens in smaller ways, quieter ways, ways that can look like mixed signals. They pull back after a good date. They take longer to reply right after feeling close. They notice whether your warmth changes when they stop performing ease. They watch what you do when they become a little harder to reach. Sometimes they ask for almost nothing. Then they study your reaction as if your patience might reveal your true character. They want consistency, but they do not trust it at first. They want closeness, but closeness can feel like exposure. So they create little moments of uncertainty, not always to control you, but to measure whether your care survives discomfort. That is the part people often miss. Testing is not always arrogance, manipulation, or a game. Sometimes it is fear wearing strategy. Sometimes it is longing, trying to feel safe before it fully arrives. A person like this may seem calm on the outside. Inside, they are asking questions they never say out loud. Will you still be kind when I am not easy to love? Will you stay steady when I stop looking impressive? Will you punish my honesty? Will your affection disappear the second I need something real? These questions do not come from nowhere. They usually come from earlier experiences that taught them love can turn quickly. Maybe care once felt inconsistent. Maybe attention came with conditions, pressure, criticism, or sudden emotional absence. Maybe they learned that being fully open invited shame, or that needing reassurance made them feel weak, needy, or easy to dismiss. So now, even in adulthood, trust does not begin with attraction. It begins with scanning, measuring, and waiting. They are not just noticing chemistry. They are noticing tone changes, delayed replies, micro-rejections, and the exact feeling in your silence. A simple text can become emotional data. A short answer can feel louder than a long conversation. If you say you miss them, they may soften. If you say it too strongly, they may tense up. If you give space, they may feel forgotten. If you move closer, they may feel cornered. This is why their behavior can seem confusing. The same closeness they crave can also activate alarm. They may light up when you understand them, then go cold the moment they realize how much that understanding matters. Not because they stopped feeling, because feeling more suddenly raised the stakes. And when the stakes rise, old self-protection wakes up. It starts making decisions before their conscious mind can even explain them. That is why testing is often indirect. It hides inside timing, emotional restraint, small withdrawals, and subtle contradictions. They may cancel once, then wait to see whether you become harsh. They may share something personal, then disappear to see whether you make them regret it. They may joke about not needing anyone, then secretly remember exactly how you responded when they looked distant. What they are testing is rarely just your interest. They are testing your emotional stability under pressure. Can you stay warm without chasing? Can you stay honest without turning cold? Can you handle their fear without making it your identity? Can you respond to complexity without humiliating them for having it? That does not mean the testing is harmless. It can confuse people who are trying to love sincerely. It can create the very instability they are terrified of. It can push away the consistency they were hoping to confirm. Because when someone feels tested but not trusted, they start feeling like they are interviewing for a role that keeps changing. They stop feeling chosen and start feeling managed. That is the tragedy in this pattern. The person testing others is usually not trying to create distance. They are trying to avoid pain. But the way they avoid pain can quietly build the exact disconnection they fear most. And still, if you look closely, the pattern makes emotional sense. It is the logic of someone who learned that words are easy, but behavior under strain tells the truth. So they create strain, just enough to see what appears. They may take longer to answer after a deep conversation. They want to know whether your energy stays steady without immediate reward. They may mention another option, another person, another plan. Not always because they want jealousy, but because they want proof they matter. They may go silent after vulnerability. That silence is often less about indifference and more about emotional recoil. They felt exposed, and now they need distance to regain control. The closeness felt good, but also dangerous. That inner contradiction is exhausting. They miss you while resisting you. They want reassurance, but hate needing it. They want gentleness, but can mistrust it when it comes too easily. If you have ever heard someone say, "I just wanted to see if you cared," this is usually what sits underneath. It is not a simple desire for attention. It is often an attempt to answer an older fear, a fear that love disappears, the second it is no longer convenient. So they may create a small inconvenience. Then watch whether you stay emotionally present. They may become harder to read. Then study whether you still approach them with patience instead of pride. They may tell you you do not have to do that, but quietly feel hurt if you stop. Because they are not only listening to your words, they are measuring the efforts you make when they stop making it easy. This pattern can develop in people who are praised for being strong, especially if that strength meant hiding need, hurt, or fear. They learned how to be self-contained. They did not learn how to feel safe being visibly dependent on someone. So they become impressive in areas where vulnerability is not required. They can be thoughtful, competent, attractive, insightful, even deeply caring. But when intimacy asks for surrender instead of performance, they wobble. Not because they are shallow, but because closeness touches older uncertainty. You see it in tiny moments. A soft look held 1 second too long. A sudden change in tone after emotional warmth. A joke that covers the seriousness of what they almost said. You see it after good weekends together. Monday comes and they act strangely flat. Not because the weekend meant nothing, because it meant enough to scare them. The more real it feels, the less casual they can pretend to be. And once they cannot pretend, the need for control grows stronger. So they test. Sometimes by delaying affection. Sometimes by becoming harder to impress. Sometimes by acting slightly detached and waiting to see whether you notice. Sometimes by mentioning disappointment before attachment is even established. It is a way of saying, I know how this usually goes, so do not get too comfortable with me. But underneath that warning is often a plea. Please prove this will not become what I already survived. That is why people who test others can feel both guarded and deeply sensitive. They may seem skeptical, but they are often reacting from hope, not emptiness. They hope this time will be different. They just do not know how to believe it without evidence. And evidence, to them, is not charm. It is how you act when things get awkward, inconvenient, or emotionally unclear. Do you become cruel when misunderstood? Do you punish distance with distance? Do you make everything about your ego the moment they hesitate? Or can you stay grounded long enough for trust to form? But here is the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone should pass every test. Some tests reveal incompatibility. Some reveal that a person cannot tolerate complexity without becoming reactive. Still, many tests do not reveal truth clearly. They reveal how someone responds to confusion they did not create. That matters, because hidden tests can make healthy people feel unstable too. If love starts feeling like an emotional maze, people stop showing up naturally. They start performing caution instead of connection. So the person who tests before trusting may think they are protecting their heart. Sometimes they are actually training intimacy to become tense. They teach closeness to arrive with uncertainty. They teach affection to feel like something that must be constantly earned back. Over time, that becomes lonely. Even inside a relationship, it becomes lonely. Because if you only trust what survives your defenses, you may never fully experience what gentleness feels like when it is allowed in early. You only experience what fights its way through. And love is changed by that. It stops feeling like a meeting and starts feeling like a trial. This is where self-awareness becomes everything. Not shame, not self-attack, but honest recognition. If you test people before trusting them, the question is not whether your fear makes sense. It probably does. The deeper question is whether your protection still matches your present life, or whether it is repeating an old emergency in a new relationship. Because many of these tests are built from emotional memory. They are not responses to the current person alone. They are responses to what your body remembers about disappointment, about inconsistency, dismissal, or being left alone with too much feeling. That is why reassurance can help for a moment, then fade quickly. The issue is not only information, it is expectancy. Part of you still expects closeness to turn unstable. So even when someone is kind, your guard may whisper, wait. Not because kindness is false, but because your system has not yet learned that safety can be real. And that is a painful place to live. You want proof, but the way you seek proof can make peace harder to recognize. You may ignore calm people and feel pulled toward emotionally inconsistent ones. Not because chaos is better, but because chaos feels familiar enough to read. Predictable care can seem suspicious when your history trains you to trust intensity more than steadiness. Drama feels convincing because it feels active. Quiet love can seem harder to believe. It asks you to relax before your body knows how. So you test whether they will chase. You test whether they will notice a shift. You test whether they can read pain you never fully confess, and when they cannot, you feel unseen all over again. But mind reading was never the real goal, safety was. The tragedy is that unspoken tests often punish people for not solving a fear they were never invited into. That leaves both sides lonely. One person feels misunderstood, the other feels like they are always one mistake away from losing access. This is also why some people become cold right after tenderness. Warmth made something real, and reality made them vulnerable. So they regain distance to feel less dependent. It looks like disinterest, but often it is emotional whiplash. They are not asking, "Do I like you?" They are asking, "What happens to me if I need you too much?" That is a very different question, and it creates very different behavior. It can make someone look detached when they are actually deeply invested. It can make someone look hard to read when they are reading everything. It can make someone seem impossible to reassure when the real issue is not language, but a nervous system that associates love with risk. So reassurance lands, then slips. That does not mean the answer is endless patience from other people. No relationship survives well when one person must constantly prove they are safe through invisible tests. Trust cannot grow only through examination. At some point, it also needs participation. It needs directness. It needs the courage to say, "When I feel close, I get scared and start pulling back." It needs someone to admit, "I notice myself testing whether you care," instead of telling you I need reassurance. That kind of honesty changes the room. Because now the other person is not trapped inside a puzzle. They are being invited into something human. And being human is the real shift here. Not becoming perfectly secure overnight. Not never getting triggered. Not suddenly trusting without hesitation. The shift is learning that fear does not have to become strategy every time. It can become language. It can become awareness. It can become a slower, steadier way of letting someone know where you go when you feel exposed. That is what maturity looks like in love. Not the absence of protective instincts, but the willingness to notice them before they start running the whole relationship. Because people who test before trusting are not heartless. Usually, they are hearts that learn to hide behind intelligence, restraint, or control. They feel deeply. They just do not feel safely. And until that changes, they may keep mistaking emotional caution for wisdom. They may keep calling distance discernment when it is sometimes fear of being known. Still, none of this makes them broken. It makes them understandable. It means their love has been shaped by vigilance. It means trust feels sacred because it never felt cheap. But sacred things cannot be built only through suspicion. They also need honesty, repetition, and moments where no test is performed at all. Sometimes the deepest proof is not what someone does when confused. It is what you allow yourself to receive when nothing is wrong. That is the harder skill for many guarded people. Not surviving disappointment, but tolerating peace. Not preparing for loss every time love feels real. Not stepping back just to feel one step safer. Because eventually the question stops being whether other people can pass your tests. It becomes whether you can stay present long enough to experience care without turning it into a threat. And for many people, that is the real work. Learning that trust is not built by making love harder. It is built by recognizing when your fear is asking for control and choosing honesty instead. By letting clarity replace performance. By naming the hate before it becomes distance. By saying, "I wanted to know if you cared," before acting like you did not. That kind of truth is not weak. It is what finally gives closeness a chance to be real. Because the people who test before trusting are usually not looking for power. They are looking for safety they can believe in. And the moment they stop hiding fear inside strategy, love stops feeling like something that has to be survived. It starts feeling like something that can actually be known.